This is one of the best coding questions that's ever given in Google interviews. So you are given a 2D matrix that contains 3 types of values. First, we have W's, which represents a wall. Then we have zeros, which represents empty space. And lastly, we have the value E to represent enemies. Now, you can place a bomb inside the matrix and it will kill all enemies in the same row and column, but cannot go through walls. Your task is to find the maximum number of enemies you can defeat with a single bomb. Let's say we're given this 2D matrix, we can place the bomb in this location to defeat at most 3 enemies. Let's go over the thought process. When we place a bomb, we want to find the total number of enemies that we can defeat in the 4 directions. What we can do is to perform 2 iterations. The first iteration will allow us to determine the number of enemies to the left and above. And the second scan will allow us to determine the number of enemies to the bottom and to the right. Let's go over the code. Create a custom class to keep track of the enemies in the 4 directions. Now implement the function maxKillEnemies taking the input grid, keep track of the number of rows and columns and the number of enemies in the 4 directions, calculate the number of enemies up and left and down and right, return the maximum number of enemies killed. Let's implement the function getEnemies up and left, iterate through the cells, initialize the current cell. If the current cell contains a wall, continue to the next cell, retrieve the number of enemies up and left. If the current cell contains an enemy, increment the value in both directions. Let's implement the function getEnemies down and right, iterate through the cells. If the current cell contains a wall, continue to the next direction, retrieve the number of enemies down and right. If the current cell contains an enemy, increment the value in both directions. And lastly, implement the function maxKillEnemies, keep track of the maximum, iterate through the cells. If the current cell is an empty space, update max if we can defeat more enemies at this cell, return max.